So can couples have a healthy marriage even if their sex drives are mismatched?
Well, I hope so, because about 4 in 5 couples are unevenly matched. So yeah, so I, did look at the data on this a lot. This is a little bit rough, but basically you could say about half, a little more than half of men are the higher desire spouse. Maybe 20% or so are actually evenly matched.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say evenly, they're fairly matched. About 20 to 25% of women are the higher desire spouse.
Want to grow your marriage? We're helping couples worldwide. Join our Marriage Changers for just 50 cents a day. Get exclusive monthly videos from Nancy and me, new digital resources, 50% off courses, and more. Start with $15 monthly at the link in our show notes. Welcome to today's Awesome Marriage Podcast. Our guest today is a longtime friend, Jay Parker. She's funny, she's relatable, she brings the whole truth to every conversation. We're talking about her newest book, The Higher Desire Wife: Understanding and Help for Christian Women Navigating Mismatched Sex Drives. Jay's been blogging at Hot, Holy, and Humorous for nearly 15 years. She's written 5 books on sexual intimacy and marriage. She has a master's in counseling and a powerful personal testimony. She's passionate about helping couples embrace God's design for sex. She leads a Higher Desire Wives community, co-hosts the Marriage and Sexuality podcast, and she lives in Denton, Texas with her husband. Let's go to the studio and greet Jay right now. Well, Jay, welcome to today's podcast. It is so good to see you again. So good to have you back on the podcast. And just thanks for saying yes and us being able to work this time out.
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks, Dr. Kim.
It's always great talking to you. And of course, you were a big part of our sex seminar that's on Awesome Marriage University. A lot of your wisdom there. People haven't jumped on that yet. I would encourage them to do that. So we're going to talk about so many different ways to get at this topic today, but let's just start off with this whole narrative that we all have heard forever, that men want sex and women want romance. I've heard it from microwave to crock pot, from all that kind of stuff. Why does that need to change? And how does it even serve women if they figure out they've got a higher sex drive than their husband does?
Well, I actually think it sells both of us short, because even if you're the spouse who wants sex more, it doesn't mean you don't want romance, or you don't want affection, or you don't want communication, or whatever the other thing is that we try to balance out the sex with. And so I think it's, it kind of sells that the higher desire wife or husband short on that. But it has really affected higher desire wives in particular, because they keep hearing this message that the husband is supposed to be the one who desires sex more, and she's supposed to want all these other things. But she's finding herself saying, well, wait a minute, I actually want sex more frequently or more adventurously than my husband. And so what's going on here? What is wrong with me that I'm not like the feminine prescription for this? And so that's usually where it starts for higher desire wives, is they start with saying, what's wrong with me that he does not desire me? And that I'm out of kilter here. And then they feel shame about it.
Do you think women personalize it more than men do?
I think, yes. I think that the dynamic gets personalized by both more. So if you're the higher desire wife, you feel like you're not the norm, and so there's something wrong with you. The lower desire husband oftentimes does not want to admit that this is going on, because he also realizes this is not fitting the script. And so he is also wondering what's wrong with him, or maybe he thinks he's fine, but he's concerned about admitting it, because he doesn't want to say to his buddies, this is what's going on, and have them look at him askance or take his man card.
Yeah, absolutely. We have so much of our pride gets in the way of when we talk about sex with other guys. I can remember locker room talks in high school and stuff like that. And it was just like, oh my gosh, go back and realize there was so much misinformation shared at that time, by everybody in there. But I think as guys, we aren't real quick to say, hey, I got a problem here.
Right. So, I think both of them are suffering from this situation. Higher desire wives in particular, though, feel very, very alone.
I would think so.
Most of them. I think actually some of the younger generations are talking about it more, but the women my age, or maybe millennials and up. I'm not a millennial. I'm Gen X. But
well, and I hope it is. I hope this maybe helps some people to say, hey, we need to talk about this. So with that, when it can, I don't know that I've ever had a couple where the sex drive was even, that I can ever even think of. So if that's an issue for a couple, this mismatched sex drive, what's the first step in addressing that in a way that honors each other and your marriage?
Yeah, I think we need to talk about what our sexual desire is and what it looks like. Instead of trying to say, this is what it's supposed to be according to the scripts. And the scripts, by the way, are often in the church, but they're also out there in the secular world. You've seen it in a lot of sitcoms, a lot of whatever. He wants sex more than she does. She's rebuffing it. So this message is everywhere. But if we can start talking about our own individual experience of sexual desire and honor what that looks like, because it's also a lot of times that the lower desire spouse, their desire just works differently. No, you've talked about this with the receptive, responsive desire, and it just looks different. And if we can start talking about what it looks like for us, and for higher desire wives, start talking about what we feel desire toward our husband for, that it is one of the ways that we do genuinely feel intimately connected. And I also do think that for higher desire wives, because there is this sense for women of being pursued, that the idea that our husband does not see us as beautiful enough to make the move, can feel a bit wounding. Now, these lower desire husbands will almost always tell me, oh no, I think she's beautiful. I'm very attracted to her. But if we can start saying, this is what it means to me, and this is what a no feels like to me, this is how my desire works, this is just how it all is for me, and then respect how we each come into that, instead of expecting us to fit some script out there that doesn't work for a lot of couples.
Yeah, it's not like this checklist and you check off the box and then you've had great sex. I mean, it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking that too, it's kind of like when I talk about about frequency, and they're comparing it to what they see in a movie or what their neighbors talk about, or the women's group or men's guys or whatever. And I say, it's got to be, what is your frequency? We're in your season of life right now. What works for the two of you together, and talk about it. And it's nobody else's business what you guys decide in that, as long as you're working on your real and enjoying your sexual relationship.
Yeah, I still remember, I don't think I've ever told this story, but I worked for a company in Lubbock when I lived there for a short while. And it was a kind of mid-sized firm. And one day we secretaries were talking about the sexual frequency in our marriages. I don't know how that came up, but it was interesting because I had been married a few years and I gave my number. There was a woman who had been married like for months, and they were just having sex all the time, all the time. And then there was a woman who'd been married for like 15 years or stuff. And she was like, well, we're only like once a week. And just was thinking like, maybe that was off. And I was like, a few years later, I've thought about that. And I'm like, she was doing pretty good. They were raising 2 young kids and her husband traveled. It was like
doing real good.
Yeah. So I'm like, we do need to kind of think about our own specific circumstances and deal with the spouse that we have right there in the life we have.
Yeah, absolutely. And the decisions you make especially on frequency, that's not for the rest of your marriage. That is for the season you're in with 2 little kids and a traveling husband. And someday those kids get bigger, and maybe someday his job, he doesn't have to travel, and that can change things completely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I know empty nesting was really nice.
Yes. Yeah, you don't have to worry about the door being locked or, or the kids asleep or all those other
Yeah.
things. That, and I think especially, I think it's, and I do think this kind of fits. It was, I think Nancy was always more conscious of that than I was. I mean, I wanted to make sure the door was locked, and you know, but it was hard for her to focus if she didn't think all those things were in place. So we worked on that together, and I did all the things that she needed done to feel comfortable.
Yep.
So let's talk about purity culture. Well, I'm not going to say anything yet about it, but it has affected the way Christian couples think about sex. So what consequences are we seeing because of the way sex has been presented by the church? I think it go back to, there was True Love, was it True Love Waits movement that went on?
Yes.
Yeah, some things like that. And the churches were all over that. And it was like, how many kids we're going to have a certain speaker talking about this, and we're going to get every kid in Oklahoma City there, things like that. So what has purity culture done to us?
Well, one of the problems with that for some people was that it made the most important part of your walk with Jesus your sexuality.
Mm. Yeah.
And then what happens when the sexual part of your life is a struggle? What does that then say about your faith, your acceptance from God, and all of that? But in a practical way, what also happened for some is that they learned to suppress their sexuality so much that it was very difficult to awaken later. So Song of Songs 3 times says, do not awaken love until it so desires. But that also means that when it desires, when the time is right, the context is right in marriage, then it should be awakened. But if you have worked so hard to suppress any sexual feelings, any aspects about your sexuality, it's really hard to wake that up. And we've talked about that a lot in recent years for what purity culture has done to women, but we have not talked very much about what it has done to men. And it has resulted in some men who are lower desire because they suppress their sexuality so much that they're struggling to wake it up, or they're fearful of it. They're fearful of, what if I now let it out? What is that going to be? And they don't know how to navigate around their own sexuality.
It's so interesting. And I don't know that I've really thought about it, thinking through, ever even really dealt with somebody with that, but that makes so much sense. I mean, it did affect the guys. And I can remember some students I was working with at the time that one of those conferences was here, and and just the turmoil that that a couple of those guys were going through, of like, oh my gosh, I'm sending, how can, like, this is the worst thing in the world. We tried to talk about, okay, where are you now? What do you want? And what does God want for you now? But it was confusing. And especially when things are presented from the stage or the pulpit, it's like, okay, this must be straight from God, when it's not always.
One of the other things that I think happened for some guys is that because you couldn't really talk about your sexual desires, your wants, your struggles or whatever like that, your sexuality could have also gone underground, in the sense that you then start partaking of the forbidden fruit. So you have questions about sex, and now you're going to go learn them from porn. Or you're going to go to chat rooms, or you're going to do whatever. And so it goes over there. And then what happens is that you can become attached to the idea of forbidden fruit. And that gets woven in. So now how you get sexually aroused is through forbidden fruit.
Yeah.
Well, now when you get married, that's not forbidden fruit. And can you get aroused in a normal, healthy sexual situation?
Right. And I've had men that have dealt with that. So addicted to porn, and then it just wasn't. I mean, even guys I was one man that really had trouble getting erections, unless it was stimulated by porn or things that he had used in the past. And it's just that whole thing that with sex, that we can't talk about it. that has caused so much of the problems of that we just hold things inside. And when we deal with that with sex, I don't think we deal with it very well.
You know, I've always found this a little bit crazy to me, because if you actually read the Bible, there's so much sex in it. You know? So, I mean, I think the things that get talked about a lot are money and sex. Because
Yes.
God knows that these are drivers for us, and we need to figure out how to steward them well.
Yes.
And so if we're not talking, if we're only also talking about all the sexual sins, but we're not talking about how to do it well, we're not teaching people how to steward their sexuality and how to embrace it, how it should be embraced. And a lot of what gets taught instead is this sexual prosperity gospel that says, if you do everything right before marriage, then once you get married, it'll all just fall in place because you did all the good things, and God's going to reward you with the best sex life ever. And then when couples get there and they have this big mismatch in sex drives, there's some conflict around it, some tension, hurt, they don't know what to do, and they feel like this might be God's disfavor.
Mm-hmm.
When it's normal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, when I do premarital counseling, we talk about sex. We talk about as much as, we talk about it, because I think, because surprises happen, and every honeymoon does not have rockets going off and stars and all kinds of stuff like that. In fact, probably very few of them do starting out. You know, that's, to me, as sex life, you cultivate that together over time by learning from each other and about each other. So sure, there's that excitement, and, you know, we were 20 and 22. So yeah, hormones were crazy and all that kind of stuff. But as our life has gone on, our sex life has just gotten better, because I think we understand each other more, and we talk about it. And I think so many couples just don't talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, totally true.
Sometimes in counseling, you know, I'll start talking about, and it seems like couples are a lot more open to talk about sex and counseling now than they were, say, 20 years ago. You know, it was almost like it was, if I brought up sex, it just wasn't received in the same way. But I think people do want to learn, and they do want to know how I can make it better, or why I'm feeling this way or reacting that way. And so maybe that is coming with, like you were saying, with the younger generations, and they're willing to get some stuff on the table that we haven't really got on the table before.
Well, I think sometimes we've been worried too, because the secular world talks about sex too much.
Yeah.
And that we worry a lot of times that if we start talking about sex, we're going to become like that. And look, that's a reasonable thing to make sure that we don't make sex an idol. But the answer was not to then say, we're not talking about it at all. It's to talk about it, and talk about it responsibly. So.
Yeah, that's it. It's so good. And I don't know why that, you know, I don't know how many pastors preach series on sex or a sermon on sex, but I haven't heard very many at all.
Very few. And I've also said that, again, much of the time that when church talks about sex, it is talking about sexual sin.
Right.
And I think that's important, especially with the high use of pornography right now. We need to bring that out in the open, and we need to be honest and tell people that this is not okay, and there is help, get help, whatever. So all that is very reasonable. But if we don't then tell them what to replace it with, then we have once again left people with a lot of don'ts, and not a way to get to what God really intends.
Yes. Makes that road so much harder to get there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about the three parts of the book. First part is why, the reason for a lower sex drive husband. We kind of touched on a couple of things. So what are some of the other things that why a man might have lower sex drive than his wife?
Yeah, and I will say this part of the book actually ended up longer than I expected it to be, because I started researching all the reasons that a husband might have a lower drive than his wife, and they just kind of kept coming. And so I tried to cover each in a few pages, and then give some ideas on how to handle those. But some things that people often don't think about are like health. your diet, your sleep cycles, things like that can really impact your sexual functioning, especially for husbands where testosterone is such an important part of your sexual interest. And there are numerous things that can lower your testosterone. And a lot of those things are health related. Stress is also another big one. This was actually a big one for my husband so I've been everything in my marriage. I've been fairly matched early on. Then I was the lower desire spouse after the kids were born. And then when I started coming back up, I surpassed him. And at the time, some of that was because he had so much stress at that time with his work and other obligations and stuff like that. And that really put a damper on that. And we know that there's a stress chemical called cortisone or cortisol that lowers your it lowers your interest, your libido. And so there's just lots of those kinds of things. Aging, as you know, I would put in the health category, and that is just, guys, expect it. The sense of urgency you have for sex is likely to decrease. So if your interest is higher now than your wife's, it might go lower as you age. And so what I see for a lot of couples is I see that there's two main kind of groups of higher desire wives that come to me. One is the wives who've been higher desire their entire marriage. And then there's like another section that kind of in midlife, as he's aging and she's at the point where the kids are grown and she's not dealing with her hormonal issues as much. And so her desire kind of comes up. So that's very normal. We talked about the purity messaging. One that doesn't get covered nearly enough is a fair number of guys out there experienced childhood abuse. And many of those guys don't talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. It's hard to talk about, and maybe not realizing that is still having an impact on their sexuality if it was sexual abuse. Or it could be, if it was just physical abuse, it could be that it's, had an impact on how they view the relationships between men and women, or just vulnerability with someone. So some of those things can make you much more protective and unwilling to engage sexually.
I think I would say in the last probably 5 years, I've worked with more guys who were sexually abused as a child, and it did affect, it was affecting their sex life and marriage. And it was something that they just had never felt they could deal with, because two of them, the parents knew about it and ignored it. I mean, they stopped it, but they never talked about it again, never took into counseling, never processed. So you can imagine if you're a young boy and that happens to you and you don't have no idea how to process that, and then you just keep stuffing it down, it's going to come out some way. And it certainly makes sense that it could come out in your sexual relationship with your spouse.
Yeah. And I think there are actually quite a few couples out there where one of the spouse has experienced abuse and the other spouse doesn't know it.
Yeah.
And they see the impact, but they don't know. And I don't know. I guess if someone out there has experienced it, I can't even imagine how difficult that will be, but it's still there until you deal with it.
Absolutely.
You got to process through that, find someone who's trauma informed and work through that. And when you get to the other side, you'll be so, so glad you did.
Well said. Don't keep pushing it down or ignoring it. Because everyone I know, that once you deal with it, I mean, that's why I love counseling. There's another side to what you've been dealing with. And getting there, like you said, sure, the road might be hard, but once you get there, you're so grateful.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what can a wife do to help her husband or to encourage him? What would you say to the wives? Okay. And I love that you brought up both ways, that, the couple that I mentioned before I got on were from the beginning of their marriage, she had a higher sex drive. But then I think I've seen it too. What you're saying is that over time, maybe midlife, whatever, all of a sudden the wife's is higher. So what would you say to the wife? How can she come alongside her help? And what can she do to help him?
Well, I think one of the things is to make sure that you affirm him in his manhood, because I have learned that is such a big deal. And we can say, well, he shouldn't feel that way or whatever, but you haven't been a man all your life and heard all the messages that get told to a man. Right. And so I think you just need to, even if you think that's not how it should be, that is the experience that men have been through, is a lot of tying their sexuality and their masculinity. Mm-hmm. And so there needs to be, like, if it is the aging as his sexual interest is going down, it's normal, and you're still very masculine. You're still a great lover. You're still whatever. And if he's not as interested, we need to make sure we're not unintentionally disparaging him for that. And I said that the first thing a higher desire wife asks is, what is wrong with me that he doesn't want me? Yeah. The next question we start asking is, what is wrong with him? And so when I had all those reasons of what could be going on with a husband, I tried to be very careful to say, we are not here to just diagnose him and say, well, here's what's wrong with him. Let's just fix him and now we're good. That's not what we're saying. Hopefully that whole section helps you have compassion and understanding so that you can then encourage him in those areas, and you can affirm him of, you know what, I understand why your sexual interest might not be as high as mine. Maybe we could figure out a way to narrow this gap in our desire.
Yeah, exactly. Working together on it, talking about it, working as a team, what's going to work for us. And I think there is maybe not in the middle place, but there is a place that can come. And I was just thinking, if I was in that situation and all Nancy did was give me, she lectured me, gave me the list of all the things I need to do different, blah, blah, blah. Or if she said, hey, I love you. Our sex life has been great. I know your desires are lower now. Let's talk about where we are right now. How can we come together? How can I support you? Let me share how you can support me. Man, I'll be all in. And in my mind, my sex drive may go up because this woman just loved on me and accepted me and affirmed me. And that would make a huge difference, I think.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times the way that we talk about things, I hate to go here in the sense that I can come across as nagging. And I think sometimes actually we are unfair to women when women speak up for things that they need and deserve and whatever. And then we say, well, you're being a nag. No, there are some times where that's not nagging. That's just being in a partnership here where you need to say what you need to say. But I do think that we still need to pay attention to our tone and our approach to make sure we're not coming across as we're here to fix it and we're here to fix you. I know a lot of times men get this, men are told that they're the fixers, that we'll share something and they immediately want to fix it. But I think it can go the other way sometimes too, that we wives can say, hey, I see what's going on. And so let me tell you, if you just did this, this, and this, like say the issue is the diet, and then you come along and you say, hey, you know what? We're not going to do that. So I've thrown out all of your candy and I've done whatever. And I shopped today and here's the plan. And he's like, no, you're not the food police.
And putting him on tofu is not going to help,
Yeah. And so I guess a lot of the encouragement too is making sure that you are, as you said, coming alongside. Yeah. And it's totally fine for you to express yourself. You should express yourself, but you should also be willing to hear him and try to put yourself in his shoes and ask, what would speak to me in this situation? And that's hard to do, but we all have a tendency to speak and act before we think and feel about it. And it can really matter to have that beat that you step back and you just go, okay, with everything I know about my husband, what is going to make him feel like I'm on his team here?
Absolutely. You want him to hear what you're saying. And so you've got to speak his language. And if his language is you saying things in a loving way, caring way, saying the things you want to say, but in a way that he feels like you're trying to connect with him and understand, it's going to go a long way. Most men don't like to be lectured. They don't like to be, and you can say the same things, I think, that you might say in what you would call a lecture, but if you're saying in a way that I love you and I want to help you and I want us to work on this together, it's just how you put it, how you frame it makes all the difference.
Yes.
Just amazing. Okay, let's talk about relational tension. That certainly can affect intimacy and desire. So what do you as a couple need to do if they feel like they're sleeping with the enemy?
Well, I think one of the things you need to do is don't force the sex thing as much. This may be a season where you're not having as much sex as you would like to have because you need to work on the relationship. Now, I say that as someone who, in my own situation, when my marriage was really struggling, one of the really helpful things for us is that we actually did have really good sexual intimacy. And that did keep going. And so there were moments where I thought, okay, I can tell he still loves me. And so it gave us some continued encouragement to work on the relationship outside. So that can also happen. But oftentimes, if the reason that the sex is not happening is the relational tension, then that's the thing you need to focus on.
Yes. And
I know that's hard if you're feeling a little starved sexually. But again, it's kind of like what you talked about with the counseling, and is where you're having to go through something, but you'll be so glad when you get to the other side.
Right.
And so there is another side. And I do think this is a piece that has not been looked at very much for guys, is because you hear this a lot about wives you've probably heard this one where men have sex to feel loved and women must feel loved to have sex. And again, I think that's one of those things that sounds nice, but I just don't think it's entirely true. Because guys aren't going to have sex. They're not just having sex all the time just to feel loved. They have some standards for when to have sex as well. And that includes feeling some safety, some love. And likewise, they might pull away when they're not feeling that in their relationship.
Yeah. Which doesn't fit the message we get from the movies and things,
Oh, no. I mean, who was it who famously said, I think it's actually a line in City Slickers, where he said, women need a reason to have sex, men just need a place, which, okay, funny line, but not true.
No, but that's what, as guys, we hear growing up, we're supposed to always be ready. And man, if the opportunity comes, doesn't matter where you are, but no. And I think really, as you grow together in your sex relationship, in your marriage, if there is relational tension, I think it does affect a guy that way, because this is the person that I've grown to love and cherish, and we're fighting and things aren't going good and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, I think it goes, definitely men can get into that for sure. And I think some of the men I've counseled that are struggling with low desire, that's exactly the reason why, is because they feel like there's this tension and it hasn't been resolved, and they don't feel their wife looks at them like they used to, like she used to, is this her Prince Charming or her knight on the horse or this, all those kind of things. And so it lowers their sex drive.
Yeah. To be able to have great sex, you need to be able to let go and be fully present with your spouse. And if you have all this other relational tension that might just clench all that up and you don't feel like you can let go and be fully there. You're always kind of waiting for the next shoe to drop.
Yes. Yeah. And you just don't feel safe. I think you use that word. And I think some of the terms that we're talking about that we hear used with women all the time apply to men. And they apply to men too.
Yeah. Yeah, they do. Totally agree.
Okay. Let's talk about screen time.
Big one.
Yeah. And I think this, some people may have just cut us off right there because they don't want to hear it. But you've done a lot of research. What do you think are the consequences of too much screen time?
Yeah, a lot of times what we talk about with screens is we talk about the pornography piece, and that is a really bad deal. So, yeah, pornography is bad for your sex life, and it can really shut down a couple's sexual intimacy. But there's another kind of screen time that is also taking a lot of people away from sex, especially young men. Young men tend to be the ones who are gaming more often. They also, I mean, I know women tend to be more on social media, men tend to be more on gaming, but the way that a lot of the algorithms are for whatever you're doing on the screen, whether it's that or YouTube or whatever you're doing, or these days, news stories, if you're going on to places and getting you're a news junkie or whatever, it's getting you worked up and it's trying everything it can to keep you on the screen, to keep you on that site, to keep you going. And so people oftentimes will spend hours doing that, but also it's giving you dopamine hits. You're getting adrenaline, like especially if you're playing a video game, you're imagining yourself there and it feels somewhat real to you, as if you're fighting the battle, as if you're doing whatever. You're getting the adrenaline, you're getting the dopamine hits, you're getting all of that excitement, that whatever. And then you don't necessarily feel the need for all of that, those things with sex with your wife.
Yeah.
Because you've gotten all pumped up and all of this stuff going on there, and you've gotten all your pleasure hits on your screen time. And I have actually, I think I have a blog post that basically says something like, get off the screen and have sex with your wife. It's my thing to guys, because I had at that point heard from so many women who were saying, we're not having sex because he spends 4 hours gaming every night
with his buddies online.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. I know a couple one time, they were young. They'd been married that long. And she knew he played video games, but some new version of the one he played, and he was there the day the store opened to get the video game. She didn't see him for the whole weekend. And
well, this has been going on for a while because way back when, long before you had these online player games and whatever, back when you actually bought a game and you would put the little CD in your CD-ROM thing, my husband played, was it Myst? I don't know, something. He played some civilization building game or whatever. And he got to where that was kind of his place to relax and go. And so he would come home and he would turn on the computer and play that. And I remember saying, I said, what do I have to do to get your attention? Do I have to dance naked on the keyboard? And he said, well, I don't know, but you could try that. And then I told him, finally, I said, you know what, honey? I said, if you die and they ask me to come identify the body, I'm going to have to say, I'm sorry, I need you to flip him over onto his stomach because I can only identify him from the back of his head. And that's when he was like, okay. And he actually deleted the game. And he has gained some sense, but we have never had that issue again.
Yes. And I think some of the guys get so into it single and they carry that into their marriage and just think, well, their wife should be okay with it, but not. This couple I was talking about, she was talking to me about it before she addressed it with him. And she said, I thought about getting naked and walking past the computer, but then I thought, what if he doesn't see me? Then I'm really going to feel bad. And so we talked about it together, and I think he got better, but I think it was for him. There's kind of an addiction there. There was an addiction there. So it was where your husband said, okay, I can stay away from that. He had to kind of withdraw. He had slower withdrawal.
Detox.
Yeah, detox. Exactly. I do a little detox on that. So yeah, there's things like that. So so couples listening and saying, okay, hey, I don't think we're doing well with screen time. What are some good boundaries they can set?
Some boundaries on screen time. I mean, I think that, some of the things that the experts say are basically to limit your time, to basically say, this is my time. I've got my 2-hour window, and set a timer. When the timer goes off, you can't just snooze it and go another 30 minutes. You have to say, okay, that's it. I'm wrapping up this round and then I'm off. Right. So that's another thing. One of the things that we've also had to do is have some rules around phones on when we're having quality time together. Yeah. So this one's my bad, because when smartphones came out and you could have all the notifications and stuff, we would go on dates and we would set our phones, or I'd set my phone there and I would check it a bunch. And finally my husband said, I feel like you're not paying attention to me, or you're paying attention to the phone. And I was like, oh. And this was after me doing this, probably the 5th date that we did this on. And so I was like, okay. So I had to go in and I shut off a bunch of my notifications. So that's a good thing to do.
Yes.
To shut off your notifications. You also most phones will have a do not disturb that you can put on there, and you can set it where do not disturb except if the babysitter calls. Right. Or except, so you can let some stuff through, but you can do those kinds of things. You can put your phone away for a time.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we have to just take charge of it and letting it, instead of it taking charge of us. And I think that's what a lot of us have done. And, I think so. I've seen or talked to guys that do video games and they say, I had no idea 3 hours passed or 4 hours passed, because they get so engrossed in it, and the time just goes. And I think anytime, go ahead.
I think that's why it's important to understand about the algorithms and the way they're designing these things, because we will then think, well, there's something hugely wrong with me. And it's like, actually, you need to recognize that you're being manipulated at times. And if you realize that, then you're like, well, I don't want to give into that. I want to be the one in control. Mm-hmm. And so recognize, okay, if I know that this is happening, then I can see why I would want to keep playing, but I want to have control over it.
Exactly. Absolutely. And I think when we look at it that way, maybe it makes more sense to control it, because I don't want something controlling me like that, I want Jesus to control me and nothing else. And that's hard enough to get there without throwing a bunch of other things in that I can get addicted to, for sure. So can couples have a healthy marriage even if their sex drives are mismatched?
Well, I hope so, because about 4 in 5 couples are unevenly matched. Yeah. So I did look at the data on this a lot, and this is a little bit rough, but basically you could say about half, a little more than half of men are the higher desire spouse. Maybe 20% or so are actually evenly matched. Mm-hmm. And when I say evenly, they're fairly matched. About 20 to 25% of women are the higher desire spouse. So when we say this, though, we're talking around 80% of marriages, I think, have a mismatch in desire. But I actually think it's going to be more than that, because, as I said, sometimes those things move around. Mm-hmm. So it could be that you're fairly matched now and you have a gap later, or you had a gap before and now you're fairly matched, and then you kind of move in and out of these things. So I kind of think 90% or so of couples are going to experience this slight different desire, or sometimes a very large gap. And we just have to be prepared for that and recognize it is normal and something that we need to grow in. This is an opportunity for us to communicate more, to serve one another more, to show compassion, and to, navigate something together as a team. So if we look at this as an opportunity, instead of, well, something seriously wrong with our relationship because we don't want sex the exact amount the same.
Right.
Then yeah, it can definitely be healthy. It can actually grow you into greater health in your marriage to have to navigate this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I think we just have challenges in marriage, and sex is one of them that we have to deal with. And we have other challenges at different stages of different times in our marriage, whether it's how do we raise our kids, but all kinds of things that come up. And I think you're right. In our marriage, I think going into it, I thought Nancy had a higher sex drive than she thought I did. And I probably did. And then we probably bounced back and forth at different times. And I think for us, it was the first step probably was just accepting it and not freaking out about it, and just continuing to learn more about each other and try to grow our sex life. And it seemed like we didn't focus so much on that. Now, it wasn't drastic difference, and I understand with some couples that it can be, and that's maybe a little more difficult to do. But I think you can have a healthy marriage for sure.
Yeah, I've heard from all kinds of higher desire wives. Most are dealing with a gap that is not small, but it's frustrating, but they can sort of manage it. But there are couples where one of rarely, if ever, wants sex, or it could be that there is a spouse who is constantly wanting sex. And so, if you have a situation with hypersexuality or sexual shutdown, that's not just a gap. That is something else going on. And it usually means it's also not just about the sexual intimacy, that there are individual things going on that need to be addressed.
Absolutely. I agree. Yeah, I think those things all get in the way. And when we resolve them, I think we see a difference most times.
Yeah. And I mean, in those situations, it's like, you cannot have a really healthy marriage if one or both of you are profoundly unhealthy.
Yes.
And so if something like that is going on, then what needs to happen is to get the individual to a healthy place.
Absolutely. To get help. So I know some women, maybe a lot of women that have had a higher sex drive, end up feeling guilty or shameful because their desire is higher than their husband's. How do they get there, and what would you say to them?
Well, I mean, they've, been looked at like they're crazy sometimes.
Yeah.
Called nympho.
Yeah.
What's wrong with you? They want sex all the time. So there is some of that. Some of the guilt that they then feel has also been because of external shaming. But they also can feel like I'm too much for my husband. Like, I want this, and I'm a burden. My sexuality is a burden to my marriage and to my husband. But I would say that for most marriages, that it's good that there's a higher desire spouse who is the one saying, hey, you know what? Our sexual intimacy matters. And I really think we should prioritize that. Just like it's true for other things. I mean, it's good that maybe there's one of you that is better at planning date nights.
Yeah.
Or one of you is better at starting conversations or whatever it is. So, it can be a complementary thing. And so you start looking at your higher sex drive in terms of how can it be a benefit to this marriage? How is it a good thing that God has given me this desire and this initiating approach?
I think that's really good, because I think somebody has to keep the fire going. And if it's me that's in the position of having the higher sex drive, then then I'm going to initiate more, going to talk about it more. And if Nancy's there, she would. I don't know what happens if they both have a low sex drive. I guess that's another story. But But usually to me, it's kind of like what you're saying. It's either kind of equal or so, or one has the higher drive. And I think for our wives and I think for a husband in that, if you're in a low desire time, be thankful that you've got a wife that has a higher desire right now and that is keeping things going, because you're kind of on the stretcher right now and she's carrying you. And you know, someday she'll be on the stretcher and you'll carry her. But that's, you gotta work at it together.
Yeah. And I think also we higher desire wives need to just embrace that our sexuality is good.
Yes.
So a lot of times women who want sex are seen as being loose or I don't know what another word for it is, but it's just, it's okay to recognize God made me a sexual being and my sexuality is a good thing.
Right.
And you know, from the very beginning, God made them male and female. And that was a good thing. And there they were, naked and unashamed. And sex began happening before the fall. Our sexuality is woven into who we are. And like I said, you do need to steward your sexuality, but it's a good thing.
So probably before the fall, Adam and Eve had the exact same sex drive. And
I would think so.
And then when they got kicked out of the garden, yeah, that's when it all started happening. It's just another thing we can blame on the enemy, you know?
Yeah, it's a broken world, so we do have to navigate these things.
Absolutely, absolutely. So how can people that are listening make sure they have a healthy, holy sex drive?
Yeah, that's an important question too, because you also do need to check and make sure as the higher desire spouse what your where you are is a good place. So again, stewarding your sexuality. I think one of the questions is to ask how often you do want it. Now, if you have felt somewhat starved, you may overstate what you want. You may be thinking, well, I could have it twice a day.
Yeah.
That's not really true. You could do that for a few days and then you'd be like, I'm exhausted. I can't keep that up. But you know, just kind of asking, like, are my frequency expectations reasonable? Now, and I think some of how you know that is if you go for a day or two without sex and you feel really antsy, you feel irritable, you feel something, you might want to think about what's going on there, because that's not typical. Even if you could have sex every day, it's normal to be able to go 2 or 3 days without feeling all of that. But so kind of checking your frequency, how often are you thinking about it? And so you make sure that your drive is not something that has become, your sexuality is not something that's become an idol. And I also really talk about how you should maybe ask what you think it says about you. Have you wrapped your identity up so much in this that maybe you're focused so much on that? I know for a lot of women, this can be part of the thing is if he doesn't pursue me sexually, then it means that I'm not beautiful, or it means that I'm not attractive. I'm not desirable. And you know, that's not what I tend to hear from lower desire husbands. They say, "Oh yeah, I think my wife's hot.
Yeah.
I just don't have this burning desire to have sex at, you know, as often." And so it's just different. So we need to make sure our identities are not so wrapped up in that. Sexuality is a part of who we are, but it is just one part.
Absolutely. You know, I think the other things we talk about that kind of came to my mind of going to a healthy relationship, good communication, knowing how to resolve conflict, your spiritual relationship. You know, as you work in my experience, as we've worked on those, our sex life has gotten better, because some of the things that were causing us some problems, we kind of worked through, or we knew how to work through things. We'll never solve all the problems, you know, because we keep having them, but we know how to work through them. And then I think that has improved our sex life. It's kind of cleared the table for sex to be, I think, how God intended it, just naked and unashamed.
Yeah, if you're coming from this from a healthy, holy relationship, you're much more likely to have a healthy, holy sex drive and intimacy and all those kinds of things.
Yeah, it does. So couples are we're talked a lot about communicating, and couples are thinking, okay, I'd love to do that with my spouse. How would you advise them to start communicating with each other about sex?
Well, I think one of the biggest issues, we talked about the importance of safety with sexuality. It's really important to have that safety and communication too, because both of these are areas where you need to be able to be vulnerable and be feel safe, feel accepted. And so some of the things you can do to make sure you do that is kind of taking that calm tone, talking about this issue away from the bedroom, not right after a rejection moment. You're too
Right.
heated then. And so even if you're upset, you say, we need to talk about this, go away, calm down, come back another time, maybe pick a more neutral location. I've also found that talking to men oftentimes works better shoulder to shoulder than face to face, at least at first, because if it's a difficult topic, not having to look at you can really help, but also touching can help. So I've had some of my best conversations with my husband walking hand in hand.
Yeah.
I had some of my best conversations with the two sons that I raised when we were in the car, because I had to keep my eyes on the road and they knew it.
Yeah.
And so they could talk to me, and it was a little safer for them to just be able to say things and not have to look me right in the eye. So those are some things that you can do to have that kind of safety. I think it's also important to really approach this with curiosity. All too often we come to a conversation and we want to express our feelings about the situation, which are valid and good, and yes, should likely be expressed. But we need to kind of start with some curiosity about our spouse's feelings and where our spouse is coming from. And, you may think you know what's going on with them, and then you start talking to them and you really take this open stance and you find out it's different from what you thought. And so we need to just kind of have this curiosity. And once we kind of let them talk, they're much more likely to hear us out when we're ready to share what's going on with us.
Oh, that's so good. Because sometimes if you've already think you know what the answer is, well, then you're not probably going to hear what they're saying. And listening is such an important part of it. Yeah, I think I think again, it's respecting each other in those conversations. And
yeah, I've been married 32 years. I don't know how long you've been married. It's a little while longer. But aren't there still moments that when you talk to your spouse and when you ask Nancy what's going on, or I ask Spock what's going on, and they answer and you think, that is not what I thought you were thinking.
Yep. Yes. Or she'll tell me something that happened, I don't know, growing up or something. We're talking about some stuff the other day when she was growing up, because she grew up in an alcoholic home, that I'd never heard before. I mean, that's why I think if you get bored in your marriage, you're just not working at it, because you'll never learn everything you can about that person. There's so much there.
Yeah.
But yeah, the surprise definitely is there sometimes. It's like, I didn't know that, or did my thought usually is first, well, when did she change? Well, she didn't. I just made an assumption and put it on her years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and some things we have changed somewhat, like,
Yes.
or maybe something happened in a certain circumstance, but in a different circumstance, they're going to have a different thought and different approach. And we didn't take that into account. So
yes.
Anyway.
Yeah, I think so. I was talking to Christine, who's our COO, and she was talking about a revelation she and her husband had of really when they'd have an argument about something, and she would give a reason, her side, and then maybe they'd bring it up again the next day, and she'd have a different reason. Well, he thought, well, you lied to me yesterday because you said this is the reason. And she said, no, I've got a list of reasons here. And when he realized that, it was a huge eye-opening, awakening for him. And then they've been married, I don't know, quite a few years now, and just now kind of figuring that out. And I think we just have to always be open to figuring those things out, because we do make assumptions about our spouse.
Yeah. One of my stories is that my husband used to say all the time to me, don't worry when I would worry about things. And finally I had to break it down. I said, let me tell you what's going on my brain right now and how like I have no idea how to just suddenly not worry. So it's
Yeah.
like, let me describe what my brain looks like. And I had to sort of describe it. And he was just like, he looked at me like, I never want to spend a day in that brain. And I was like, well, you see now why it's not helping to just tell me, don't worry.
I know. And I think, and that goes back to, as guys, we want to fix things. And so we say things like that. And, there's just no way I can tell Nancy not to worry. And she doesn't just look at me and shake her head like, I can't do that. So
yeah, I did give some other ideas, the things he could say. But anyway.
That's good. That's good. Any rules for initiating intimacy?
Do it. That would be the rule.
There you go.
Yeah, I think that, the best thing to do with initiating intimacy is make sure it's not a pressure experience, because it can come across as pressure to some lower desire spouses. And so I started thinking about initiating intimacy much more as an invitation. And so, and figure out kind of what works with your spouse. So do they need a heads up? Is it better for you to schedule sex? Because that gives your lower desire spouse time to mentally and emotionally, physically prepare. For me, one of the things that really helped, actually it was a game changer for my marriage. So no guarantees, but if this is a tip that could help somebody out there, I've included in the book as well. It's this idea of kind of flipping initiation to availability. And so, I mean, sometimes I will still just ask my husband if he wants to have sex, but then there would be times too where I would say, hey, I just want you to know that if you want to have sex tonight, I'm totally up for it. And then I would go in the bedroom and I would start reading my book or doing whatever I could do. And that way I didn't have an expectation. He didn't really even have an opportunity to say no, because I just threw it out there.
Yeah.
And so he either showed up or he didn't. But what would start happening is I threw it out there and I gave him time to process. And so he wasn't thinking about sex before, but now he's thinking about it. And I actually got more yeses. So not every time, but he started showing up more. And so it was just a very no pressure way to throw it out there for him.
I think it's so good. And I think the same is true for our wives. I know when our kids were growing up, if I said, hey, I don't know, hypothetically, hey, I'd love for us to have sex tonight. Just think about it. I'll see you tonight. And that would give her the same thing, same today. And some days she said, when I thought about this morning, I thought that was a great idea. But both the kids had friends over. I fixed dinner for 6 people. Can I get a rain check? And let's try tomorrow night. Great.
That's another great idea, the rain check. I am all about the rain check. And I do try to tell spouses, if you say no to your mate's sexual advances, try to say not now more than no. And it's also is helpful if you give a reason. If you say, you know what, I'm really attracted to you. I would love to do that, but it's been a long day. I am really tired. I can't get into that space right now. But even if you get a no, ask for a rain check. Well, obviously now's not a great time. Do you think we could knock that out the next day or two, or what would be better, or later today in the morning? The rain check is great.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you can either one give it, like if Nancy could say, I'm exhausted tonight. Hey, let's both get up earlier, wake up early in the morning and do that. And, or something. And then I think either one of you can initiate that, but I think it takes the rejection piece out of it.
Yeah. So I've heard from a lot of higher desire wives, and I think this is true for husbands too, which is that when you don't know when it's going to next happen, there's just kind of this on edge kind of thing of, well, is it today? Is it today? Maybe it'll be tomorrow. Is it like, especially if it's been a while. I mean, if it was just yesterday, calm down. But, but yeah, but if it's been a while, you can start being like, is it, when's it going to happen? And just having that rain check or having it scheduled, or, or even if you say, hey, it's been a while and I would love for us to get together in the next few days. What does your schedule look like? Things like that. Just being able to kind of know it's coming can sort of just let you just take a breath and be okay, and know that your spouse loves you. Your spouse wants to be with you.
Right.
They don't have the same drive that you do, but that's okay. Y'all can figure out when to come together.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I think some couples don't want to schedule, but I think in certain seasons and times, it's very appropriate. And it takes out what you were saying there. I had this was a long time ago. She had a paper calendar, but 2 days a week she put TS on it, which meant think sex. And he knew those are the days she had that on there. And so it worked out for both of them. So, there's so many ways to talk about this and figure it out together.
Yeah, I think when we say schedule sex, it kind of sounds a little clinical, but I really think what you're scheduling is, or you're putting a date, you're scheduling a sex date.
Yes.
And when I think about that, I think about how, when we were dating before we got married, we would set aside a time to be together, and we might know what we were going to do. We might be like, hey, we're going to go out to eat and see a movie, but maybe we didn't know where we were going to eat or which movie we were going to see. We figured that out once we got together, or whatever. It's the same kind of thing. So if you're you're just making time for it on your calendar. And then once you get there, it can develop however you want. It's not this like, well, now we have to do it exactly like this.
Right. It just kind of takes away the not knowing. It takes away some of those other things. And not that you would schedule it for the rest of your life. Maybe some people do. But again, for a season, it might be really appropriate and helpful.
And it doesn't mean you can't cancel that. Just like there were times when you could cancel a date and you could say, you know what, I don't feel good today. We're not going out tonight after all. So
that's right. If your wife is throwing up, no, it doesn't matter if it says it's Tuesday and it's supposed to be sex. No,
but it's Tuesday.
yeah. Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Final question. What are you loving about your marriage right now?
That's a really good question. And actually, for a while, I would have said just loving empty nesting, it just being the two of us. But actually, our one of our grown sons is about to move back in with us for a time to pursue some higher education stuff. And I'm actually very pleased about that development for his life. And I think what I'm loving about that is how we've been completely merged. My husband and I have been completely merged on these decisions. And just both of us, seeing our family in the same way and valuing our family in the same way, and being willing to make a few sacrifices. Like,
sure.
I mean, definitely have to wear robes around the house.
Yeah, but it does change a few things, right?
but yeah, just feeling that we are, after all this time, that we're in such a partnership, both as as lovers, but as parents as well.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really cool. Our daughter moved back home the last semester of college, and then she also moved home the 6 months before her wedding. And both those times were great. It was amazing to see her come back home and keep her room clean and help with dishes and take out the trash. And you never said anything. It was like, oh my gosh, we did something right. And it's kind of like,
yeah,
we're glad you're home. Yeah. So
well,
I think
don't set the bar so high. I don't know. He hasn't moved in yet. We'll see how it goes.
And we got a man and a woman too. So there could be some differences in their personalities in that.
Well, he's a mechanic. So we're also hopeful he can, work on our cars.
Absolutely. Give him his list. Here's your punch list.
Yeah.
Home, right?
So I'll do your laundry if you go fix my car.
Oh, that's good. Well, this has been a great conversation as always with you. I love your approach to this topic, and the fact that you've become someone that people, you're kind of the go-to. You're our go-to at Awesome Marriage for sure.
Thank you.
And
can I do that? I'm going to do the showing off the
yes,
cover thing.
Our Wife. It is available everywhere right now. I would encourage you to pick it up. I think it's a good book to read together. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it would be.
I think it'd be a really good book to read together. And so, because there's so much in it.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Look forward to seeing you again, and have a great rest of your day.
All right, you too.
Thanks. Well, that was such a great episode with so much information on it. It's such an important topic. So if you know someone that needs to hear this, please share the podcast. Next week, I'll be talking about how to rekindle intimacy and how to guard your marriage from emotional affairs. So we'll see you next week.